Every Western serves the same lie. Cowboys around a campfire, ribeyes sizzling, warm bread passed hand to hand. Ride into an actual frontier camp at sundown and you'd find something else entirely. Men hunched over tin plates, shoveling in beans that had been boiling for 6 hours and were still half hard. Gnawing on bacon so salt-crusted it had to be soaked just to avoid fatal thirst, smashing biscuits with rifle butts to crack them open and float out the weevils. This was the diet that built the West. Not protein-rich and hearty, but monotonous, infested, and barely digestible. The frontier wasn't sustained by abundance. It was survived through endurance, salt, and the absolute authority of the one man who controlled whether you ate at all, the camp cook. The foundation of frontier survival wasn't beef. It was the 3 B's: beans, bacon, and biscuits. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Start with the beans. Pecos strawberries, they called them, because that's what passed for humor when you'd been eating the same thing for 8 weeks straight. Pinto beans were light enough to haul in bulk and packed enough protein to keep men upright in the saddle. But they required hours of soaking before cooking, and even then, at high altitude, they stayed rock hard, no matter how long they boiled. Cowboys choked them down half-cooked, then spent the night with gut-twisting indigestion that made sleep nearly impossible. Then the bacon, except it wasn't really bacon, it was salt pork, sow belly, slabs of pig fat cured in so much salt they turned white. You didn't eat the cattle you were driving. Those were cash on the hoof, owned by the rancher, worth $60 a head in Abilene. So you ate preserved pork that had been packed in barrels months earlier, sometimes a year earlier, and had absorbed so much sodium that a single piece would leave you desperately thirsty for hours. Cooks soaked it in water to leach out enough salt to make it edible. If they didn't, men would drink themselves sick trying to compensate. And the biscuits, hot rocks, which weren't fluffy buttermilk clouds. They were hardtack, flour and water baked into dense, tooth-breaking bricks that could last for months without spoiling because nothing could survive in them, not even taste. Cowboys kept a wreck pan near the fire specifically for smashing hardtack with rifle butts or boot heels because your jaw couldn't break it down alone. You'd drop the fragments into your coffee to soften them, and while they absorbed the liquid, the weevils and maggots that had burrowed into the flour would float to the surface. You skimmed them off. Then you ate it anyway. This wasn't food, this was fuel. Barely. Before 1866, cowboys carried their own rations in saddlebags, a few pounds of cornmeal, some jerky, maybe a tin of beans if they were lucky. When those ran out, you went hungry until the next town, which might be a week away. Then Charles, Goodnight, took a surplus Studebaker military wagon and rebuilt it into something that changed how the frontier fed itself, the chuck wagon. This wasn't just a cart with supplies thrown in the back. Goodnight designed a chuck box mounted on the rear, a wooden cabinet with drawers and compartments for everything the cook needed. Flour in one drawer, salt and baking soda in another, medicinal whiskey tucked beside the sourdough starter, which the cook guarded like it was gold, because if that starter died, so did any hope of edible bread for the next 2 months. The chuck box folded down into a work surface where the cook could knead dough, slice salt pork, and measure out coffee without kneeling in the dirt. Beneath the wagon bed, a canvas sling called the possum belly sagged low to the ground. It wasn't for food, it was for fuel. When the crew crossed treeless prairie, there was no firewood, so they collected buffalo chips, dried bison dung, and stuffed them into that sling until it bulged like a tumor. The cook burned it to boil beans and fry bacon, and the smoke smelled exactly like you'd expect burning excrement to smell. You ate through it anyway. At night, The cook aimed the wagon tongue toward the North Star. Not for poetry, for navigation. When the trail boss woke at dawn, he'd check the tongue's direction and know which way the herd needed to move. The chuck wagon became the camp's anchor point, the place where men gathered, ate, argued, and collapsed after 16-hour days in the saddle. But the wagon was only as valuable as the man running it, and that man held more power than anyone else on the trail. The camp cook wasn't hired for his charm. He was usually an aging cowboy whose knees had given out, whose back couldn't take another season of breaking horses, whose hands had been mangled by ropes or crushed by hooves. The trail destroyed men's bodies, and when you couldn't ride anymore, you had two options: get off the frontier entirely or learn to cook. But don't mistake this for a demotion. A good cook made $40 to $60 a month, double or triple what a regular cowboy earned. Because if the food was inedible, the crew didn't just complain. They quit in the middle of nowhere, and the entire operation collapsed. So the cook, cookie or cusi from the Spanish cocinero, became the most feared and respected man in camp. His word was law, not the trail boss's word, not the rancher's word. The cook's. Rule 1, never ride upwind of the chuck wagon. If you kicked dust into the beans or the bread dough, the cook would scream at you in front of the entire crew, and no one would defend you. You deserved it. Rule 2, man at the pot. If you stood up to refill your own coffee cup, you were now legally obligated to refill everyone else's. You didn't get to sit back down until every tin cup in camp was topped off. This wasn't politeness. This was law. Break these rules and the cook might accidentally burn your portion, or serve you last after the food had gone cold, or conveniently forget to wake you for breakfast entirely. But the cook's authority extended far beyond food. He stayed with the wagon while the crew rode out, which made him the camp's stationary hub. So he became the doctor, digging out splinters, stitching up gashes, pouring whiskey into wounds and down throats. He became the dentist, pulling rotten teeth with pliers while men bit down on leather straps. He became the barber, shaving heads to control lice. He became the banker, holding the crew's wages in the chuck box because there was nowhere safer to store cash. The cook controlled whether you ate, whether you healed, whether you got paid. He was the dictator of the prairie, and every single man in camp knew it. Coffee wasn't a comfort on the frontier. It was a chemical necessity that kept broken bodies functional through 20-hour days of physical punishment that would hospitalize most modern humans within a week. The dominant brand was Arbuckles' Ariosa, sold in 1-pound bags with a glossy egg and sugar coating that preserved freshness, a genuinely innovative piece of food technology for the 1870s. But what made cowboys obsessed with Arbuckles wasn't the quality of the beans. It was the stick of peppermint candy tucked inside every bag. Grown men, hardened, weather-scarred men who'd been kicked by horses and gored by cattle, would race each other for the privilege of grinding coffee beans by hand just to claim that single piece of candy. The cook would hold up the bag and yell, "Who wants to grind?" And cowboys would shove each other aside like children, because after 6 weeks of nothing but salt, lard, and beans, that tiny burst of sweetness represented the only sugar they'd taste until the next town. The grinding itself was brutal work. The beans went into a hand-cranked mill bolted to the side of the chuck wagon, and you'd turn that handle until your forearm burned and your shoulder ached. But you did it, for peppermint. Then the cook dumped the grounds into a massive pot, often a 5-gallon kettle, added water, and boiled it directly over the fire. No filter, no measurements, The grounds settled to the bottom, and you poured carefully to avoid getting a mouthful of sludge. The result was a brew so thick and bitter it functioned more like a stimulant drug than a beverage. The joke about horseshoes floating in the coffee wasn't really a joke. It was an accurate description of consistency. If you dropped a horseshoe into the pot and it sank, the coffee wasn't strong enough yet. Keep boiling. Men drank it scalding hot, cup after cup, because it suppressed appetite, sharpened focus, and delayed the physical collapse that came from malnutrition and exhaustion. It didn't make the work easier. It just made it possible to keep doing the work at all. The frontier ran on caffeine, salt, and denial. The lack of fresh produce didn't just make meals boring. It turned men's bodies into slow-motion medical disasters. Scurvy wasn't just a sailor's disease. It thrived on the frontier, creeping through camps where men went months without touching anything green. Your gums started bleeding first. Swollen, purplish tissue that oozed when you bit into hardtack. Then old scars reopened, wounds that had healed years ago splitting apart as your body literally ran out of the collagen needed to hold tissue together. Your teeth loosened in their sockets. Your joints ached with a deep, grinding pain that never stopped. You became lethargic, unable to summon the energy to stay upright in the saddle even after 12 hours of sleep. This was vitamin C deficiency destroying you from the inside out. And the frontier had no oranges, no lemons, no vegetables beyond the occasional foraged wild onion that tasted like dirt and fire. So cooks improvised with vinegar. They dumped it into stews to mimic the acidity of citrus. They mixed it with sugar and flour to create vinegar pie, a grotesque dessert that tasted like sweetened stomach acid, but satisfied some deep cellular craving for something that wasn't pure salt and fat. Cowboys ate it anyway, scraping their plates clean, because their bodies were screaming for micronutrients they couldn't name. But the real nutritional salvation came in the form of something Hollywood would never show you. Son-of-a-gun stew. When a calf was born on the trail and couldn't keep pace with the herd, it was slaughtered, not wasted, used. The cook butchered it completely. Heart, liver, kidneys, brain, tongue, and the marrow gut, the tube connecting the stomachs, which was turned inside out, scraped clean, and chopped into chunks. Everything went into the pot. Organs, fat, gristle, blood. The result was a thick gray stew that smelled like iron and tasted like desperation. But it was a nutrient bomb, packed with the vitamins, minerals, and proteins that beans and salt pork couldn't provide. Men who'd been suffering from night blindness found their vision sharpening after a bowl. Bleeding gums stopped bleeding. Energy returned. This wasn't food culture. This was biological triage. The frontier didn't reward picky eaters. It killed them. The campfire scenes in Western films show lean, strong men with perfect teeth laughing over whiskey and steak. The real frontier produced malnourished workers with rotted molars, chronic digestive agony, and bodies that aged decades faster than they should have. Hollywood's cowboy feasts on ribeye, carved from the herd he's driving. The actual cowboy choked down salt pork so briny it had to be soaked for hours because touching the cattle meant losing your job and possibly your life. Those animals were worth more than you were. You protected them. You didn't eat them. The film version shows fresh vegetables and golden cornbread. Reality offered beans that stayed hard no matter how long they boiled, causing gut-twisting indigestion that made sleep impossible, and hardtack so dense you'd smash it with a rifle butt, just to break off edible fragments, then float the weevil larvae out of your coffee before drinking it. Where movies show casual whiskey consumption, real camps ran on coffee thick enough to support metal objects floating on its surface. not for enjoyment, for chemical intervention. That brew suppressed hunger, sharpened focus through exhaustion, and delayed the physical collapse that came from working 20-hour days on nutritionally bankrupt fuel. The romantic image shows peak physical specimens conquering the wilderness through strength and willpower. The medical reality was scurvy, splitting open old scars, teeth loosening in bleeding gums, and bodies so depleted of basic vitamins that men developed night blindness and couldn't heal minor wounds. Their peak condition was malnutrition held barely in check by whatever organs and offal the cook could scavenge when a calf died. Even hydration was a lie. The frontier cowboy didn't sip from a flask at his hip. He drank alkali poisoned water that caused diarrhea, or coffee boiled with the same contaminated water, or nothing at all for hours until his body screamed for liquid. Dehydration was constant, so was the kidney damage it caused. The teeth told the truth Hollywood ignored. By 30, most frontier workers had lost multiple molars to decay, infection, and the camp cook's pliers serving as dentistry. The combination of pure sugar in coffee, complete absence of dental care, and hard foods that cracked enamel turned mouths into infected disasters. Men lived with abscesses that swelled their faces and fevers that should have killed them. And the hearty appetite myth that these men ate huge portions and stayed satisfied was backwards. They ate barely enough to function, and their bodies adapted by becoming more efficient at extracting energy from nutritionally empty food. They weren't thriving. They were surviving in a state of controlled starvation that would be recognized as a medical crisis today. The West wasn't conquered by Hollywood heroes. It was survived by desperate humans eating weevil-infested bricks and organ stew, held together by caffeine and the absolute authority of whichever broken-bodied cook managed to keep them from starving outright. Their reward for months of this punishment was wages barely high enough to get drunk in the next cattle town before signing on for another season of the same brutality. The legend was written by people who never smashed hardtack with a rifle butt or picked maggots out of their coffee. The reality was written in rotted teeth, reopened scars, and bodies that gave out decades before they should have. The Wild West wasn't tamed by square-jawed heroes with gleaming smiles and boundless energy. It was endured by malnourished workers whose bodies were falling apart in real time, who ate weevil-infested hardtack because the alternative was starvation, who drank coffee thick as mud because it was the only thing keeping them conscious through another day of punishment their bodies weren't designed to withstand. The romantic frontier of Hollywood campfires and whiskey-soaked camaraderie was a fantasy. The actual frontier was scurvy, dysentery, and the kind of chronic malnutrition that turned 30-year-old men into physical wreckage. Every meal was a negotiation between hunger and disgust. Every cup of coffee was a chemical intervention against collapse. Every day required pushing a deteriorating body past reasonable limits using nothing but salt, caffeine, and the stubborn refusal to admit you couldn't take it anymore. The cook wasn't a beloved camp character dispensing wisdom and biscuits. He was a dictator whose authority came from controlling the only thing standing between the crew and death. Barely edible food that kept you functional just long enough to make someone else rich. This wasn't adventure. It was survival at the absolute edge of what human bodies could tolerate. The men who lived through it didn't emerge stronger. They emerged damaged, aged beyond their years, with rotted teeth and compromised organs, and the knowledge that the legend being written about their lives bore no resemblance to the reality they'd endured. The West was built by people eating whatever wouldn't kill them immediately, held together by the grim understanding that tomorrow would be exactly as brutal as today, and the day after that, and the month after that, until their bodies finally gave out or they scraped together enough money to escape. If you want to keep stripping away the mythology and confronting what frontier life actually demanded from human bodies, our next video covers the medical nightmare of trail injuries and the horrifying improvised surgeries performed by men with no training and whiskey-sterilized knives. Subscribe to keep seeing the West as it really was, not the legend, but the price paid to create it.